of Influenzo. We are talking all this month about influence, the influence you guys have. And we were kind of like on a salty theme. So as you're mowing down, you're about to get thirsty, everybody's going to be like, Carl, let's wrap it up because my mouth is so dry. I want to ask you guys, what weird family traditions do you have? Mackenzie, what do you think? Other people do this? It's a German tradition? I have never I've done a lot of Christmases in my life. Never has pickles been involved in it. Do you still eat them? They're plastic? You don't put a real pickle in there? Have you done this, Anna? Yeah, but you've heard of it? I've never. Have you heard of it? You have one? Who here has a Christmas pickle? Everybody's. Of your Christmas? You have pictures of Emily's Christmas pickle on your. Where did you find it? So what happens if you get to find the pickle? I'm blown. My mind's blown right now. There's a special. Is it a good present? So it's not like something bad. It's not like coal. Gets the first present. Have you heard of this before? You've never heard of this before? My mind is blown. You know about this, but your dad doesn't know about this? It's from all those Hallmark movies you watch. That's what the Christmas pickle showing up. I've never heard of that. And you don't use a real pickle? No. All right. A stocking full of Spam? I thought they were good presents. Oh, a Spam cook-off. That sounds good. So, I got a great Spam story. I won't share it now, but I just want to prep that. I have a great Spam story. All right. What do you got? Gets all over them. All over them. All right. The first person to fall asleep at a family event gets clothes pinned. I will remember that if I'm ever hanging out with you and your family. Diligence, Red Bull. All right. Yeah. So you're like Feliz Navidad. Around. It's a different, like, hey, Macarena, like that. Like Christmas Eve, you're singing Macarena with pots and pans. No, that is a little different. That is a little different. I can get down a little like, hang on, all right. Paul, what do you got? You wouldn't decorate it? You would like wake up and it was decorated. Christmas magic. Or adults, more likely adults. Wow. All right, what do you got? What weird tradition? What was that? Can you say it a little louder? I heard Secret Santa. I heard Secret Santa, and then I saw Ava do this. So I'm assuming it's really good. I just didn't hear it. What did he say? You win $10,000. Yeah. Dude, I am coming over to your house. We're going to be doing Christmas together. That is great. Bergamino.
At the Bennett family reunion,
Yeah.
very intense bow tournament, and the winner gets like trophies and stuff. And me and Emily made it to the semifinals last year.
Semifinals.
Yeah, by old people. Yeah.
Man, old people. So you guys have a bowling tournament.
Bocce.
A bocce ball. Bocce. You guys have a bow staff tournament. And a bocce ball tournament. You made it to semifinals, and old people beat you.
I don't even know who they were, and they were our family.
That's fair. That's fair.
We were
That,
at the pavilion at
that's cool. That's cool. Those are, my mind is still wrapped around the pickle thing. We might just have to wrap up early tonight. So we have weird traditions. Humans have weird traditions, right? Humans take things and we make traditions about that. We find important things in things that we are normally just kind of bland, but we develop importance for them. And one of those things is salt. Salt has this very unique history inside of human culture. It's a powerful analogy. And we don't think about it that much because there's salt everywhere, right? Like we have salts, we have kosher salt, sea salts, Amazon salt, what? Table salts, table salt, rock salts. Yes, there's salts all over the place. We don't think about salt. But back in the day, salt was a powerful commodity and actually shaped the way we did the way we do things today. So we're going to watch this quick video about a little bit about the history of salt so we can kind of understand all that salt is. So check it out.
The history of salt is actually really fascinating. Here are a few tidbits about the history of salt. Back in the day, salt was this huge commodity. It was so valuable. Salt was actually used in burial rituals. So mummies and things like that, they used salt to preserve the bodies. Another fascinating thing, salt was actually so rare in certain parts of the world, they would actually trade salt for its weight in gold. They would give away gold for salt. It was that valuable to certain areas in the world. Other countries actually used it as a healing, a sterilizer. If you got a cut in your arm or a gash or something like that, they would literally pour salt into the wound. Salt was a healer. Salt was a preserver. There was actually a certain tribe called Israel that's talked about in the Bible. And Israel was God's chosen people. You see, they had a special relationship with God. And Israel actually had all of these rules and regulation and laws they had to follow in order to maintain this right relationship with God. And the things they had to do to keep this relationship, something they had to do, they had to have religious rituals involving something called incense. And now incense is just something you burn and it produces this smell. Think like an old-timey candle. The smell that it would give off would be a pleasing aroma to God. That's what the Bible said. And they would use this in something to forgive their sins or in a covenant promise, which was just a bond with God. And a key ingredient in this incense, the thing that made them right with God, that forgave them sins, the key ingredient was, you guessed it, salt. That was the key ingredient in what got them right with God and all this stuff. Salt was powerful. Salt was important. Way back then, it brought people right with God. It preserved, it healed, it did all these incredible things. And even today, think about what goes on with salt now. I mean, you get some French fries, what's the first thing you do with them? You start pouring salt on those bad boys to make them pop. Or maybe if you poured a little bit of salt in your drinking water, it goes from something that is awesome and refreshing to something that you are spitting out of your mouth. A little bit of salt goes a long way. There's so much to salt. It's powerful. It's influential.
Salt is this crazy commodity. And again, we're not as influenced by it today because we have things like refrigerators. And we can put our food in there and that keeps it cold. But back in the day when they didn't have refrigerators and you had to go on long journeys, you needed to take care of your army, you needed to take care of your people, you needed to preserve food for long periods of time, you would have salt. And it's crazy because some countries have lots of salt, some countries don't have a lot of salt, and so salt would be traded among these countries. And it was so important to the world back then. It was something that everybody had to have in order to eat. And then there's all the biological aspects of salt about how we need salt inside of our body to actually function and to actually be able to do things for the electrical currents to travel well through outside of our bodies, we need salt. Salt is so important. It's actually amazing how salt preserves food, because the way salt molecules are built is water is attracted to the salt molecule, and the water breaks down the salt molecule and pulls it apart, and so it dries everything out completely, so you can have a completely dry, making meat and skins and stuff be able to last far, far longer than they would normally, because microbes live inside of water. And when you take away the water, you take away the microbes, you take away the thing that rots everything. It's science. And then we look at the influence salt has had around the world, because the root word salt, that sal, shows up all over. We show up like salami. It's a salted meat, right? So we have salami, salt, salami. Salary, because back in the day, Rome used to pay their soldiers in salt. That was their salary. So they'd be like, marchy, marchy, marchy. It's like, oh, right, it's Friday. Grab my bag of salt and head on home to dry stuff out or whatever. I don't know what Roman soldiers did when they weren't pillaging. And that was their salary. And then salvation, the idea of healing and restoring, shows up inside of our language. Salt plays a huge, huge part in our modern day world. Without salt, we wouldn't have been able to travel and build communities like we have today. And again, it's not an important thing to us because we have refrigerators. We're able to go and buy our food fresh. We're able to cook it new. But imagine if all this electricity was taken away. Imagine if there was no longer an Aldi's and a Wegmans, and the only way you were going to get meat was by taking care of chickens. And if you wanted to have a cow, these 500 pounds of beef to last you into the winter, you needed to figure out a way to preserve it for a long period of time. And it would be salt. And it may sound like, oh, well, I don't eat meat, and that's fine. But you need salt to be ingested into your diet. And if you're not getting enough of that, again, your body starts messing up, your joints aren't moving, the electrical things aren't moving. Your hair's growing fine, though. So, Jesus, back in the day, he's sitting around talking to a group of people. And he gives this analogy. And I wanted to put all that inside your head. I wanted it to sit there so that when Jesus shares this analogy and you hear it, you can understand a little bit of what this word salt would have meant to the people hearing it as Jesus shared the story. So in Matthew 5:13, it says, "You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot." You are the salt of the earth. And if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? Jesus is sharing with you, you are the salt of the earth. You have this influence. You have this ability to heal, to influence, to change, to preserve, to move forward. You have this power inside of you when it comes to the earth, when it comes to the people around you, when it comes to relationships, when it comes to your school, when it comes to your family. You have the power of salt. You're like, that is the lamest superpower ever. It's like fire, wind, salt. It's like, oh, I don't want that. But no. The idea is salt is such this versatile, powerful element. If you've ever made like a cake and you've put in too much salt, you know that cake is, just like that. If you don't put any salt in, you got to have that right amount of salt. You get so frustrated when you're about to eat mashed potatoes. You got that gravy, and then the cap falls off, and there's like this big old pile of salt, and you're like, I need more mashed potatoes. Because a little bit of salt goes a long way. You put salt in your water, and it's like, oh, I miss Lake Michigan. And salt has that power. You put salt in a wound, yeah, right? But you do that, and the reason they put salt in the wound, it would dry it out, get rid of the microbes, and heal it up so it could heal correctly. When you get your wisdom teeth taken out or a tooth extracted, they have you gargle salt because that kills all the junk inside of your mouth. And it's disgusting, but it's one of the best ways to take care of it. You have the power of salt. As you're going throughout your day, your influence is powerful. And the cool thing about it is, it's not a lot. Just like you don't need a lot of salt to taste it, you don't need to be a big, powerful, influential person in order to change people's lives around you. A little bit of influence goes a long way. A little bit of your influence goes a long way. And we've all had that experience again when we've had too much salt or not enough salt, when we've needed the salt. And you know, inside of your life, salt does not work when it's up on the shelf, when it's not on the dinner table, when you're not engaging with it. What good is it? If you bought a brand new thing of salt and you're like, look at this, Mom, it's Morton's. And she's like, oh, that's okay. Thank you for buying groceries. It's great. I didn't buy groceries, Mom. I bought salts. And what are we going to do with all that salt? We're going to look at it. It's going to sit here on our shelf, and nobody will ever touch it. Your mom would be like, you are my child, and I love you, but you are dumb. Like, right? Like, it's like, what's the point in salt? And this is what we do. You guys have the power of salt. You guys have the power to influence the people around you. You guys have the power to change lives. And just a little bit of your influence goes a long way. But often when it comes to things of Jesus, instead of engaging and dashing it, a little bit of Jesus into the situation, we prefer to put it up on the shelf and let it be that thing that we go to on Wednesday nights, that we engage with on Sundays, but we never leverage the rest of the week. We never engage with it. And that little bit of influence, your little bit of influence that you have, has the ability to drastically change somebody's life. Because Jesus is saying, you are the salt of the earth. And here's the problem. What we often do is we forget this second part. What happens if it's no longer salty? What happens if it's not being used? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. If your faith is just put up on a shelf, it is no longer good for anything. If your faith is something you never engage with, you never use to influence, you never lean into, it is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. This is a little like, oh no. But it's also super encouraging because a little bit of salt goes a long way. So I'm not telling you that you need to, get that big old thick Bible, and showing up and get a tie and going to school. Or maybe like one of those like Jesus shirts. It's like, Jesus is my home slice. And you you don't need to be like walking through school like, do you know where you're going to go when you die? Like, you don't need to do that. You can be a normal person and just let your influence affect those around you. You can be a normal person. You can just lean into that influence a little bit. A little bit goes a long way. A little bit of your influence goes a long, long way. It doesn't take very much. There's this guy you may have heard of. His name's Kanye West. And he started out taking old gospel songs, mixing them up, and selling them to up-and-coming DJs and hip-hop artists. And after a couple years of just taking old songs and remixing them, his name became more popular, and now he is one of the most influential people in the music scene. Not always positively, but he carries a lot of weight and a lot of clout. And he started just by selling CDs that he mixed together. This other guy, if you come to church on Sunday, you see him, Mark Stenzi. He's our lead pastor here. And he started Parker Hill Church 30 years ago with 40 people in a small room in Clark Summit. And this last Christmas, we saw over 4,000, I think it was like 4,200 people attend a service where they had the opportunity to hear about how much Jesus loves them, how Jesus came, lived a perfect life, died on the cross, and rose again so that we could spend eternity with God. His work, his influence is spreading throughout northeastern Pennsylvania. When I was 14 years old, my grandma sent me to Lake Ann Camp. She leveraged her influence as grandma. I didn't want to go to camp. I would rather ride my bike around and try and talk to girls. But I had to go to camp. And at that camp, I met Jesus. And I started going to church. Had an opportunity to use my gifts. And now I'm a student pastor. And without my grandma's influence and her action of just sending me to camp, you wouldn't know me. And that would be really bad for you. I'd probably be fine. I'm just joking. No, I want to be doing what I love. You guys wouldn't know Elizabeth, my wonderful wife. That'd be terrible, give or take, with the student pastor, but not Elizabeth. From that little act of influence, it drastically changed my life. All my grandma did was send me to camp. She sent a dumb teenager to camp. One conversation, one opportunity, one invite. Some of you have invited your friends to 3D, and it's sparked conversations. And it's sparked an ability to talk about Jesus. You're serving inside of our family ministries. And you're talking to kids, and who knows what those kids are going to grow up to be and what they're going to grow up to do. But I do know that they're going to look back and say, man, there was somebody who loved me and cared about me enough to show up every week. You guys carry influence, and it doesn't take a lot. It just says, hey, do you want to read a Bible passage with me? Hey, do you want to go to church with me? Hey, do you want to sit by me at lunch? You want to go to Dunkin'? Hey, have you ever thought of just that little bit of influence? If we could leverage that, we could change the people around us. And it doesn't take much, because I know that we all think there needs to be these big, grandiose gestures. I gave somebody a new minivan. I'm a life changer. I really love minivans. So we tend to think that. But then we come here on Sunday, and what stories do we hear? Hey, so-and-so invited me to church. So-and-so was willing to have a conversation with me. So-and-so prayed with me. So-and-so showed up when I was just down. That little bit of influence becomes maximized because you have the power of salt. You are the salt of the earth. And your little bit of influence can go a long way. And so we're going to head into our small group, and we're going to challenge you guys. We have little cards, and there's challenges inside of those. Something for you to leverage your influence for Jesus this week. And for some of you, you're going to look at that little card and be like, that's easy. And some of you are going to look at that little card and say, who wants to trade? He's like, I don't know if I can do that. And we want you to find something you feel comfortable, like you can do, that kind of pushes you outside of your comfort zone a little bit. If you're looking at it and it's like, be nice to your little brother or sister, and you're like, I'm an only child, you can trade it. But something that pushes you, that leverages your influence, that pushes you outside of your comfort zone, and to take it seriously. We're going to head in a small group and tackle those. Thank you guys for coming. Don't forget next week as we talk a little bit more about your influence.